Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalist in Canton. I am Dick Mesger, your worship associate this morning. Rev Bev will be back with us next Sunday. I am delighted to welcome to our pulpit the Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh. Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh, a PhD and a licensed social worker, is a Unitarian Universalist community minister who is a certified internal family systems therapist practitioner and trained in spiritual director with a private practice known as Sacred Play Explorations. She brings a wide variety of lived experiences with urban, parish, and academic ministry to her preaching, writing, and work with individuals and groups. And I'll introduce Reverend Walsh to do a mutual call to worship.
Good morning. Good morning. It's delightful to be with you again this morning. And as I like to say, what is the good of having a guest minister if we don't have a couple glitches in the sermon at some point? So apologies to the quartet on the prelude. So I'd like to begin today with two practices that I introduced to you at the end of the service that I led the other week. One is that our UU organization, Equal Access, recommends that when we are at a pulpit, we describe ourselves for those who might be visually impaired in our congregations or who are watching on Zoom, and also for those who might be calling in on Zoom. So I'll just begin to say also that I'm about 5'2" and shrinking as I age. I have light brown hair, I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a very colorful turquoise stole robe this morning with a purple top for Easter. And the other practice that your congregation hasn't yet integrated, but I would recommend if you want to consider it, as a land acknowledgement. So let's begin with a land acknowledgement this morning and invoke the ancestral spirits of all who have tended to these lands upon which the First Parish Unitarian Universalist Canton sits today. May these ancestors come to and be among us now, and may those gathered say, Presente, Presente, okay? To the ancestors, we acknowledge that these are the traditional homelands of the Neponset Band of the Massachusetts tribe, the tribe who is still present with and living among us today. We acknowledge to the ancestors the great harm done to indigenous peoples and renew our promise to be accountable and aware by acknowledging this history and cultivating respect in our relationships with indigenous peoples, the land, and the waters. And the other practice I had introduced you to is a mutual call to worship, because we are the priesthood and the prophethood of all believers in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, as James Luther Adams has written of. So we call each other mutually to worship, and you will find this one either in your order of service insert or also number 628 in your gray hymnal, Rolling Away the Stone. I invite those present as well as on Zoom to read together as we mutually call each other to worship this morning. Let us begin together, all together, not responsively. In the tomb of the soul, we carry secret yearnings, pains, frustrations, loneliness, fears, regrets, worries. In the tomb of the soul, we take refuge from the world and its heaviness. In the tomb of the soul, we wrap ourselves in the security of darkness. Sometimes this is a comfort, sometimes it is an escape. Sometimes it prepares us for experience, sometimes it insulates us from life. Sometimes this tomb life gives us time to feel the pain of the world and reach out to heal others. Sometimes it numbs us and locks us up with our own concerns. In this season where light and dark balance the day, we seek balance for ourselves. Grateful for the darkness that has nourished us, we push away the stone and invite the light to awaken us to the possibilities within us and among us, possibilities for new life in ourselves and in our world. That was by Sarah Morris Campbell. And invite Dick to come up to lead us in the chalice lighting and the covenant.
Okay, so in terms of the chalice lighting this morning, there is a reading in unison on your handout called the Unison Chalice Lighting. We begin with, "We light this chalice for the beauty and wisdom found in the world religious traditions of humility. Today we honor the conferences of several religions' holy days and festival celebrations this month. For Muslims, Ramadan. For Jews, Passover. For Christians, Easter. For Hindus, the Hindi New Year, as well as Ram Navami, a hugely significant Hindu festival celebrating the birth of Lord Ram, the seventh avatar of Lord Vishnu. May we as Unitarian Universalists seek to do justice to the fullest depths of human and the cultures from which they spring." And now let us say our covenant together in unison. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace with respect and understanding. To seek knowledge and freedom. To serve our fellows and humankind. To the end that all souls shall grow together into harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God, by whatsoever name we worship. And now we'll sing together hymn 269, "Lo, the day of days is here." Please rise in body and spirit as you are willing and able. And now I invite, where'd he go? Cindy Kogler to come and give us a story.
Hello. Today's story isn't so much a story as it is a reflection on stories. Stories are powerful. They offer comfort, give guidance, ease loneliness, and open our eyes to new ways of being and seeing. Never are we too old or too young to be transformed by a story that finds us at exactly the right moment. Stories shape us. At the same time, we play an important role in the stories we receive. It is up to us, the readers, the listeners, the recipients of the story, to make meaning of what we hear, to assign significance to the pictures that live behind our eyes and in our bodies. Take, for instance, a rainbow, which I have here. Rainbow. Now I'm going to ask you guys to help me out with a little bit of your own ideas. What does a rainbow mean to you? No wrong answer. Shout it out.
Bright colors.
Bright colors. Beauty, beauty.
Hope.
Hope?
Inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness. I missed one.
Arch.
Art.
Arch.
Arch.
Wonder.
Wonder. Mm.
Yellow brick road.
The yellow brick road. Yes.
Pot of gold.
The pot of gold. Luck.
Leprechauns.
Leprechauns.
Kermit the Frog.
Oh, Kermit the Frog. Absolutely. So many songs about rainbows. What a great list. Any last thoughts about the rainbow? That was wonderful. Thank you. You can see from just this one example that a single thing can hold a multitude of meaning. We make the meaning. Stories are like that. They don't mean just one thing. There is no one person who can shine the light on the true meaning of Easter, Passover, Harry Potter, Winnie the Pooh, or any other timeless tale. It's up to us, you, me, all of us, to hear the stories, to listen for whatever meanings bubble to the surface, and to be with all that arises. As you listen to today's sermon, I invite you to do just that. Hear, listen, and be with what arises. Thank you.
Silence, let the silence.
Isn't it lovely to be able to sing again and to have a quartet singing? It's beautiful. Thank you. So when I lead meditation and prayer, as you know, I lead it in a Zen Buddhist style. So I begin with a meditation, and then I invite the bell to sound 3 times, and then we sit quietly together for a few moments to pay attention to our breath. And then I invite the bell to sound again, and I lead us in spontaneous prayer. So again, if I invite you to find a comfortable way to sit, both feet on the ground, your hands in your lap, or resting comfortably at your side. And just bring your attention to your breath for a few moments. So often we're rushing through our days and we forget to notice that we're breathing and to have appreciation for the breath that is a sign of life itself. Notice that it comes in cool and it's warmed by our bodies on exhale. It connects us to all that is living. Notice the points of contact between your body and the chair where you're sitting, and just let yourself sink into that feeling of support that's available without any effort right now. In Buddhist practice, we just let the thoughts pass by, the sounds pass by. We just notice. We're just present to what is. And just invite the muscles of your body to relax if they're willing and able. Let your shoulders relax, your neck relax. We hold a lot of tension there. And let the muscles of your face soften and relax. As I invite the bell to sound 3 times. And if you like, you can let a soft smile, a half smile, come to your lips. God of many names and no names, many genders and no gender, and whom we know most closely and intimately within our Unitarian Universalist tradition as a precious and mysterious spirit of life and love that moves in us and among us and out into our larger world, bringing our faith and values on the winds of that spirit. This morning we give thanks again for the opportunity to be with one another in person and hybrid through the miracle and efforts of your volunteers, your staff, everyone who contributes to Sunday morning worship, from minister to religious education director to office people and musicians and music director and tech support and quartet. It is so lovely to be able to be together. Let us give thanks on this Easter morning for the hint of the resurrection that is building and coming still. We give thanks for the blessing of all the religious traditions that are meeting in this month, and the hope, the sense of hope and renewal and liberation that they bring. We give thanks for the opportunity to see loved ones, to visit with loved ones that we haven't seen in a long time, and for new births, the delight of new births. All these things are good, the crispness of the air, the coming of spring, the sun when we see it, the flowers that are blossoming. The earth is renewing, and we give thanks. And our hearts are large enough to hold also the magnitude of the pain and suffering of this world in these times and the fears and challenges that they pose. So much, so much. It is hard to bear witness, and it's hard to watch the news at times, and to experience at times the feeling of helplessness or despair. Yet we know that our faith is a large one, and when we are in community together, in congregations and in multiple congregations around this country and the world, we know that we are stronger for coming together, for sharing a faith that is large and powerful and works as a force of good in this world. May we tap into that feeling of renewal that is always possible, and the liberating hope that it brings, honoring it today, particularly on Easter. Blessed be. Amen. And we're going to sing a responsive centering hymn. You can remain seated for this one, though I believe the quartet is going to lead us in a round for it. I know this rose will open, number 396. Our reading this morning is Liminal Space by Polly Castor. In this waiting place, we loiter, hover, on a tentative cusp a threshold between the familiar and the unknown, with no possible retreat. The customary comfort zone is gone, and where the entrance ushers is not yet seen. Our new question, let alone its answer, still is ambiguous. We are in limbo. We can either hesitate or go forward. The gossamer veil of divine nearness flutters ever so slightly, breathing inseparably close as we step to embrace the unrevealed with trust, a shimmering opportunity for connection and listening and being led right on through. Lean into this portal. It is the doorstep to fruitful ground. Lo, the day of days is here. Easter, resurrection, and the Christ event of our time. What meaning does this particular religious holiday hold for contemporary Unitarian Universalists, particularly now with all that we continue to face of pandemics, threats to democracy, and of war and an ongoing climate crisis? In our chalice lighting this morning, we honored the powerful convergence of holy days for what are known as the Abrahamic religions: Islam's Ramadan, the Jewish Passover, Christianity's Easter. Now, this convergence occurs only every 33 years. Passover and Easter sometimes we find together more often, but Ramadan and Passover and Easter only occurs every 33 years. And all three religious traditions focus on hope and liberation in the convergence of their different stories, if you take the time to learn about them. In our chalice lighting, we recognize the Hindi New Year and Ram Navami as well, and we could also recognize that the Buddhist Theravada New Year occurred yesterday. However, when we as Unitarian Universalists try to capture everything, are we skimming the surface and not paying sufficient attention to the special significance and opportunity before us? Now, as a Unitarian Universalist who practices humanism, as a religious naturalist and socially engaged Zen Buddhist, I have a commitment to seeking the wisdom in all religions, and this includes Christianity. I have a commitment to doing justice to each religion, to the message and breadth and depth and height of all religions, including Christianity. And the events of Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and Easter are messages of breadth and depth and height that have value and need to be heard for our time. But how do we as Unitarian Universalists begin to approach the wisdom in these messages? Messages and language often concretely associated with destructive judgmentalism or meaningless irrationality, both from our personal lived experiences or in the larger public realm. As Unitarian Universalists, we do this by learning to play with metaphors and our language of reverence in new ways, by learning to witness and seek wisdom in new forms, and by finding resonance in the liberating experiences of others as they reform Christian language on their own terms. Metaphor is poetry. It is our way of expressing that which is not concrete in human experience, but is true. We saw this a little bit with the message for all ages and the rainbow. A rainbow is something that is actually not real. It's an optical illusion, but we encounter it and we bring it into our hearts in new ways, and we have metaphors that are associated with it coming after a rainstorm and brightening the day. We find our way into that. It's a metaphor, but it's true. It reflects an experience that we're having. Metaphor has the capacity to hold multiple meanings in tension and with flexibility. Metaphor points to that something more that can't be seen concretely or measured exactly. And that something more is the sum total of the breadth and depth and height of our experiencing capacity as human beings, our embodied emotional core in life. It is from the place and potential of metaphor that we can approach Easter and the resurrection, metaphor that is not simply fiction, but metaphor that is grappling with the real and true experience of being human in knowing the reality of death, moving through suffering and pain, and then choosing and risking the passion and love of life as an ongoing commitment. Now, we'll never know in literal detail all aspects of Jesus' life and death, but we can hear what his followers tried to convey of their experiences of Jesus through the communities that wrote the various gospel accounts. The meaning of Good Friday is attached to the day of Jesus' crucifixion. And for those who wonder why it would be called good, that's because a more ancient meaning of the word good is holy. We can envision and feel what it must have been like to stand beneath his crucifix and watch a man they loved passionately die a slow and agonizing death, labeled as a criminal under empire, but known by them as a prophet and Messiah who showed them the meaning of love and hope and compassion on earth, the meaning of God's kingdom on earth, as a Jewish man, a Jewish Palestinian. Jesus' presence was so real to his followers that over the many years of community building and gospel writing in the 75 years following his death, he would become a living symbol of hope and resurrection, a living symbol for each community of gospel writers in their own way. While he was no longer in bodily form, his spirit and life practices lived on in each of their lives as a role model for a way of being. This is a fascinating and very real story of a human experience. Each person within each community found their way into the Christ story through their own experiences and reshaped the metaphors of that story through their lived experiences. And that continues today. Resurrection is a human experience that often starts as a personal encounter with passionate love and loss, and then rebirth into new hope and love of life in the aftermath. And ultimately, the fullest sense of complete resurrection entails connection to communal resurrection, to being held by something larger of an interdependent web of existence. As you know that I've said that that's our God language. And wholeness of being, ultimately, is interdependent with all human beings everywhere and within the vast expanse of life itself. Now let me share a story that touches upon the start of personal resurrection. But let me warn you first that this is a challenging and painful story to witness, yet it also does touch on the depths of the Good Friday through Easter story. Now, I first heard this story on NPR, National Public Radio, a few years ago, one Easter afternoon, after I experienced another Unitarian Universalist Easter service as disconnected from the arc of the Jesus story, in which the experience of Good Friday is what makes the experience of Easter deep and meaningful. In a prior year, I had experienced a religious education director telling the children that the Easter experience is like a yo-yo, because it's about going down but coming back up. And then she also gave all the kids their own personal yo-yo, and they were standing in front of the congregation doing their yo-yos. Now, if you think about metaphors and their meanings, it was adorable, if you think about metaphors and their meanings, you might see that equating the Easter experience with a toy might have some inherent problems for conveying depth and breadth and height. But there's another more subtle issue with the yo-yo metaphor. It also individualized the Easter experience to only our personal ups and downs. So that year, I heard the story on NPR, and I had gone off to a different Unitarian Universalist church for Easter, and Jesus was barely mentioned in that service, and the focus again was on spring and the start of the Red Sox season. Right? Those are all good things, like the kids doing their yo-yos, it's all good, all well-intentioned, all good, okay? And Red Sox, yay, Red Sox, okay? But how does that really help us as Unitarian Universalists to grapple with the wisdom of what is known in the Christian tradition as its highest holy day. How does that help us to engage the depths of a world religious tradition? So driving home from that particular Easter Sunday, my attention was gradually caught by a woman's voice on NPR. So again, I'm going to give an activation warning because, and I say activation usually then trigger, but an activation warning, because this is a story of an early death for a child, and something I, as well as others I have known, we've known, but for different reasons. This woman was telling the story of her daughter Liza, age 5, whom she had learned was dying of leukemia. Now, one night, Liza crawled into her mother's lap and tucked herself into the corner of her mother's arm. "Mommy," she said, "am I always going to have leukemia?" Now, what a moment that must have been for her mother. And you begin to imagine this moment of deep truth between them. "Yes, Liza, I think so." "Mommy, am I going to get to be a mommy?" In ever so soft a voice, her mother replied, "No, I don't think so." "Mommy, am I going to get to be a teenager?" "No, I don't think so." "Mommy, am I going to get to be 7? "No, I don't think so." "Mommy, I know how I want to die. I want to die right here with you. No, I mean, I want to die first, and then I want you to die right after me, so we can be together." "Liza, when you die, part of me is going to die with you, but part of you is going to live with me forever." So deep breath, everyone. It's a powerful story, right? And one that clearly reaches into the Good Friday experience of Jesus' death, but also hints at the Easter experience of resurrection through her mother's living memory of Liza. A memory that isn't just allowed to be personal, a memory that is now living in the world community through NPR's transmission of that story on one Easter afternoon, and here as well. Now I have to ask, why is NPR more comfortable than some of us as Unitarian Universalists in touching this depth of pain and loss, but with the hint of hope and work to come in the resurrection? Liza's mother was doing the hard work of resurrection in sharing her daughter's story to a broader community. The work of resurrection eventually must become communal work. And the work of resurrection often is a long and slow process, filled first with small resurrection moments rather than a solitary, brilliant, and permanently renewing flash of life and passion. Shelley Rambo, a Christian theologian, has called it the work of Holy Saturday. That's an underestimated aspect of the arc of the tradition. This is the day that bridges between the Good Friday of loss and the resurrection of Easter. It is the type of work that benefits from having a spiritual discipline already at hand, or at least a beloved community surrounding you. Remember that in the first community's written gospel account, Mark, we are left with only the empty tomb, Mary's grief in the garden, and Jesus' cry of, my God, why have you forsaken me?" ringing in the air. The Christian community's fuller sense of the resurrected Christ took 75 years to form in writing, and it continues to form anew for each generation's experiences. Now let me share a different story of communal resurrection, one that also can be challenging to hear, yet calls attention to the work of Tina Cherry and the Peace Institute with survivors in the aftermath of homicide in Boston. Their annual Mother's Day Walk for Peace is coming up on Sunday, May 8th, and will be in person again for the first time in 2 years, and I hope some members of Canton may find a way to participate. They are an organization I have studied and volunteered with and supported for many years. And Tina's son. The institute is named as a living memory to the loss of her son to gun violence. So returning to my story, my first learning of the power of communal resurrection came through my immersion in the Black inner city community of Boston through my UU Urban Ministry youth program for 18 years. In 1996, Moses, a 20-year-old, was shot in the head and murdered on Blue Hill Avenue, a murder witnessed at close range by 2 other youth in that urban youth ministry program. Moses was the older brother of Randy, age 11, a member of our youth program since he was 7 years old. Now, as you can begin to imagine, this was devastating for both the family and the community, but that community represented not only Roxbury and Dorchester, it also represented Newton and Lexington, adults and youth who knew Randy and other children. Joy and her son Thomas had been volunteering with our program for 2 years. Thomas was the same age as Randy, and they liked to hang out together on field trips, particularly the amusement park rides. I didn't know how we possibly could make it through this terrible tragedy, but we did, and we did it together. As an entire community, 1 day, 1 month, and 1 year at a time. Now, Thomas could have chosen not to participate in the funeral or subsequent memorial service, or his mother could have shielded him from doing so, but there they were, Joy and Thomas, together, hugging Randy and walking with him and his family as best as they could through their experience of pain and loss. 2 years later, Thomas would be the first and only student in Newton to utter the words racism and classism when he presented his coming-of-age credo before the congregation. In that resurrection moment, we saw Moses living again as Thomas shared his story and used Moses' life and death as a call to deeper action by Unitarian Universalists. We saw him, as my Zen Buddhist tradition also would say, in the ultimate dimension, living in a new form. So let me take my cue from Thomas and call all of us, myself included, to a deeper sense of connection to communal resurrection in these extraordinary times that we face. Today we are facing the need for national resurrection and global resurrection. This is our Christ event for our time, diving metaphorically into these words and the Christian story. On an ongoing basis, we face crises of war, violence in our streets, poverty in our nation and in the world, ongoing threats to our democracy and the LGBTQI+ community, a pandemic, and a worsening climate crisis. And this can leave many of us with a pervasive sense of depression or despair. But the giving up place never serves us well. And let me suggest that depression is actually a symptom of the psychology of American individualism. A psychology that makes it difficult to value community, a psychology rooted in a nation founded on white supremacy and colonialism, on racial, class, and gender oppression and separation, a psychology in which each person is expected to pull themselves up by their own bootstrap and then is granted the illusion that they did so. The cure and the resurrection for our nation is in first breaking through our own historical amnesia about how we came to be and what culturally and historically shaped us. And we need to do this before we can break our various addictions to energy and oil and to consumer toys and luxury goods that distract us from our depression and prevent us from first creating a beloved national community, let alone truly being a partner to a global resurrection. To live and seek the kingdom of God on earth entails love, passion, and risk. Entails the risk of encounter with worlds and experiences very different from our own. There can be change and loss and transformation in such encounters, but ultimately there is hope and promise of renewed life. Remember that resurrection first starts with a personal encounter with and search for resurrection, and then moves to a communal resurrection. Each of us must start and move from the place in which we have our being. This may mean first sharing with our church members the stories of our own losses and search for renewed life, including in these challenging times, before we consider the issues of national or global resurrection. Resurrection is a step-by-step process and a slow process. In Ezekiel's Valley of the Dry Bones, the army of skeletons does not spring quickly to life. They are remembered, piece by piece, bone to bone, sinew by sinew, flesh and skin, finally the breath of life. In this vision, we see the Jewish tradition clearer focus on the hope and promise of communal resurrection, one also witnessed in Passover this week. Holocaust survivor Ezel Wiesel writes, all prophetic visions in the book of Ezekiel are inserted in their proper calendar. 14 dates are indicated to help us place the speaker and his discourse. One notable exception, the vision of the dry bones, meaning that the resurrection is undated. And we understand why. That vision, that promise, that hope is not linked to either space or time. That vision, that consolation is offered to every generation, for every generation needs it, and ours more than any before us. End quote. There's promise of hope in life itself and in the life we share together. We can learn together and act together. We have many opportunities in these coming weeks to learn about all the interlocking natures of class, consumption, racial privilege, gender construction, connected to these larger national and global issues of resurrection with which we struggle. And we also have continual opportunities to share our personal stories and journeys with one another, to connect to the ever-present spirit of life. Spiritual resurrection is a lived reality in the stories we carry and actions we manifest as individuals and as community, in the beauty that we see in the living presence of our earth, in the flowers we share with one another, and in the moments of tender care that we give to one another as a community. This is the hope and promise of our communal ministry together as Unitarian Universalists, a connection to Easter as a process of daily resurrection, now more than ever. Happy Easter, blessed be. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. And I invite you to rise in body or spirit as you're willing and able, and for the quartet to lead us in this one. invite you to join me in the mutual benediction, which is also in your insert. And I invite you also today for Easter to, I don't know if the Red Sox are playing today, but go celebrate with the Red Sox. Find a yo-yo and play with a yo-yo, okay? Enjoy the children, all right? These are all wonderful and good things. So let's join together in mutual benediction, number 624, Hope Again. God of Easter and infrequent spring, announce the large covenant to deceitful lands, drive the sweet liquor through our parched veins, lure us to fresh schemes of light, rouse us from tiredness, self-pity, whet us for use, fire us with good passion, restore in us the love of living, bind us to fear and hope again. By my colleague Clark Dewey Wells.
As I extinguish the chalice, let us recite in unison, we extinguish this flame, but not the truth, the warmth of community, for the fire of commitment. Those we carry until we are together again.